Chullin, Daf Nun Vav. Today, Tuesday, Tes Zayin Shvat, Be'ezer Hashem. The Mishnah says these are the treifos in a bird. We had until now the treifos by a behema. They're exactly the same thing by a bird, provided there's a few chidushim, says Rashi, by a bird. Nekuvas aveshet, a hole in the esophagus creates a treifa. If there's a slit in the kana, in the direction of the shechita, it creates a treifa as well. Very interesting case, if a weasel came and bit a chicken right where the brain is, that also creates a treifa. The Gemara brings Rav Shmuel and Levi who say that there's a way to check whether or not the weasel punctured all the way to the brain. That is, you put your finger into the mouth of the chicken and you push upwards towards the palate and you push the brain, and if brain matter comes out of the holes on top, then the weasel actually punctured the brain. Now, the Gemara says that a brain has two layers. There's the upper membrane and the lower membrane. And according to one shita, all you need is a puncture of the upper membrane. Now, how's that going to work? How's this test going to work? If you push up, you're just going to have resistance by the lower layer. Says the Gemara, you're not going to have any resistance because that lower layer is very thin, and when you push up, the brain matter will still come out through that layer. Zeiri wanted to say that since the weasel's teeth are very thin and they're crooked, so when you push up, the test is not going to be effective because the membrane might cover the holes because they go on an angle. Then he had charata from that, and he says, listen, there's a machlokes between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish says that the test with your hand works, but the test with a nail doesn't work. What's a test with a nail? You take the brain and you go over it with the nail, and if you bump into a hole, that means that there's a puncture wound there. Rabbi Yochanan says no, the only way to do it is with the nail test, not with the finger. What's the svar of the machlokes? The Gemara brings down another machlokes similar to this one between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda says you could only use a hand. Why? Because a nail is mechala mamonim shel Yisrael. You're creating waste with Jewish money because the nail might puncture a perfectly good brain. Rabbi Yochanan says no. The best way to test it is with a nail. And if I don't test it with a nail, and I test it with my hand, then I might be feeding treifos to Klal Yisrael. What happens if the skull of the bird breaks? There's a hole in the skull. So a typical bird, it's not a problem. But a water bird, says the Gemara, like a duck or a goose, in our days, Canadian goose, even the Achronim say, Rav Shizi says his geese in his days, that's a water bird. Since the membrane around the brain is very thin, then a punctured skull is enough to make it treif. This is the digestive system of the bird. First it eats, it goes into what we call a crop, a zevek. Over here it's undigested, there's no acids, so like the Mishnah is going to say later on, even a puncture over here, or even if you remove it, according to Rebbe, it's not a problem. Then it goes here to the stomach, then from there it goes to the kurkuvan, the gizzard. The Mishnah Baya says if there's a hole in this part, the gizzard, then it's treif, and it continues on to the intestines. If there's a hole in the intestines, that makes it treif as well. What happens? Interesting case. A guy decided to barbecue his live chicken. And then he had charata, the chicken ran off. And you know that the heat got to it. So how do you check to see if it's treif? Says the Gemara, well, the organs that start off red, like the heart, liver, and gizzard, if they turn color, they're discolored to green, then it's a raya that the heat got to it and it's treif. If they started off green, such as the gallbladder or the intestines that start off green and then it turned to red, then it's a raya that the heat got to it and it's treif. What size of heat do you need here to make it treif? The size of a nekev. What if your liver, the liver of the chicken, turned green on the top part where it's connected to the intestines? Although a liver, you can remove the entire thing, it'll be kosher as long as you leave it kazayis. So what do I care if it turned green? Because if it turned green, it's a siman that the intestines also got burned. You just don't know about it, and therefore this bird is treif. What happens if this red turned green? We say it's treif, but you put it in a boiling water and the green came off. Then I could say that the reason why it was green is because there was some smoke, but you boiled it, you remove the smoke, it's completely kosher. On the same vein, says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, that if you take an organ that was red and it remains red, and you put it in boiling water and all of a sudden it turns green, that means that the reason why you thought it was red is because there was a layer of smoke smoke screen that created the red, but really it's treif. But you don't have to cook it, says the Gemara, because you don't want to bring a reisa, you don't want to be machzik and reisa. As long as you open it up and you did a bdika, that's enough. Says the Mishnah that we know by a behema that if a behema fell more than 10 tefachim, it's called nefula. Nefula means we don't know what's going on in the insides. Maybe something got damaged, crushed. By a bird can't fall 10 tefachim because it has wings. It'll soften the blow. So what do? How do you have a nefula by a bird? If you take a bird and you throw it into the wall, or you step on a bird, or an animal steps on a bird, that creates a nefula. If the bird lives and it shakes violently, it lives for 24 hours, then the bird is kosher, says the Gemara, provided that I open up the bird and I check that there's no problems, that there's no broken chut hashidra or something like that. Says the Mishnah that these are the birds that are kosher if it just has a hole in the kana, or the kana was slit this way, not this way, then it's kosher. Why? Because if it's slit this way, then every time it bends down, it actually closes up the kana. If the weasel bit the chicken not where the brain is, it's also kosher. If there's a hole in the crop, the zepek, it's kosher. Why? Because there's no acid here, and Rebbe says, even if you remove it completely, provided obviously that there's a way for the food to get into the stomach, otherwise the animal will die from starvation. If, says the Mishnah, now, we're talking about the zepek, we might as well mention that there was a Maisa, the Gemara says like this, that Reb Samaria and Reb Tzadok, they went to be Ma'abed the year in Arnoi, and they said that the tarpachas, which is the uterus, has the same halacha, it would seem like from the Lashon, Hoyru b'tarpachas kerebi bezefek. We know that Rebbe said by zefek that's completely kosher if you remove it. That's the halacha b'tarpachas. Now that can't be what they meant, because then they should just say, tarpachas is kosher. Why do they have to compare it to something else? That makes no sense. So therefore the Gemara has two ways to understand this. Either what they said is two separate halachas. They said tarpachas is asur, and they also said the halacha is like Rebbe by zefek that it's kosher if you remove it. Or they said one halacha. They said tarpachas is kosher like Rebbe says zefek is kosher. However, we don't hold like Rebbe by zefek. We hold that zefek is pasul, not like Rebbe that says zefek is kosher. Now, going back to the Mishnah, what happens if the innards come out? As long as no puncture, you can put them back in. So the Gemara, provided you put them back in exactly like Hakadosh Baruch Hu put them in the body, in the same order. If you change the order, the chicken could die. The Gemara says, unbelievable maiso where a guy saw somebody fall off a roof and his intestines came out. He was worried to put them back in because he might put in the wrong order and it'll kill the guy. So what did he do? He did a trick. He shechted the guy's son right in front of his eyes. So the guy went crazy. He went like this, and it sucked his intestines right back in the right order. So you're going to ask me a question. What did he gain? He saved this guy, but it killed the guy's son. The answer is, he didn't really kill him. It was just achizas einayim, it was magic, it looked as if he killed him, but he didn't kill him. Says the Mishnah, what if the bone of the wing broke? We don't have time to open this up and show you what the bone looks like, but there's a bone, as we all know, wings broke, or he pulled off his wing, that's kosher. If the feet of the chicken break below the knee, then even if you see the bone, it's kosher. Above the knee, then it's kosher as long as you don't see the bone. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you take off the noitza, you take out the down of the bird, right over here, you take out the down that doesn't have like that stem in it, then it's pasul. Now, one last halacha. Where does the zepek start? That Rebbe says that you can remove the entire zepek. It's connected to the veshet. This is from the Chullin, taken with permission. Says the Gemara, where it starts becoming more narrow, meaning it begins the veshet, and the rest is the zepek.